Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sister Sister, a podcast for spiritual baddies. We're your host, Elena Maya, and today's episode is
Self-actualization in spiritual application. Now, you're probably thinking, what the heck does that even mean? Well, friends, we're going to tell you, but first we got to give you the context. So, we're going to give you the very basic Merriam-Webster dictionary definition, and then we're going to give you the psychological definition that you can find pretty much in any psychology research paper that has to do with self-actualization, and a lot of them mention it whenever they're talking about humanistic psychology. So, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to put it simply, self-actualization is to realize one's full potential. Now, if we go to EBSCO, we can get a more detailed kind of idea of what it is. Self-actualization is a concept central to humanistic psychology, characterized as the process of realizing one's potential and functioning at an optimal level. It emphasizes individual growth, autonomy, and fulfillment while promoting values such as truth, love, and justice, notably articulated by psychologists Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Self-actualization Self-actualization describes individuals who possess qualities such as an accurate perception of reality, acceptance of themselves and others, and a focus on broader societal issues. These individuals often exhibit deep empathy, creativity, and a sense of humor, and they maintain fulfilling relationships while transcending cultural and environmental constraints. The theory has significant implications for various fields, including counseling, education, and workplace management, advocating for a positive and constructive approach to human development. In therapy, self-actualization contrasts with medical models by emphasizing personal strengths and growth rather than merely addressing dysfunctions. Critics of the theory raise concerns about its individualistic nature and potential cultural biases, but proponents argue that it can foster ethical living and social engagement. Ultimately, self-actualization serves not only as a psychological framework, but also as a potential ethic guiding individuals toward interpersonal compassion and societal reform.
that was a lot, but now we're going to dive into the psychological characteristics of self-actualizers. Compared with ordinary or average persons, self-actualizing persons, as Maslow describes them, may be characterized as follows. They show a more efficient and accurate perception of reality, seeing things as they really are rather than distortions based on wishes or neurotic needs. They accept themselves, others, and nature as they are. They are spontaneous in both behavior and in thinking, and they focus on problems outside of themselves rather than being self centered. Self actualizing persons enjoy and need solitude and privacy, are autonomous with the ability to transcend culture and environment, have, have a freshness of appreciation, taking pleasure or finding wonder in the everyday world, and have peak experiences or ecstatic mystic feelings that provide special meaning to everyday life. They show social interest, which is a deep feeling of empathy and sympathy, identification, and compassionate affection for humankind in general, and have deep interpersonal relationships with others. They carry a democratic character structure that includes humility, respect for everyone, and an emphasis on common bonds rather than differences. They disqu- they distinguish between means and ends, and they have a clear sense of ethics. They also have a philosophical and unhostile sense of humor, are creative and inventive in an everyday sense. They're resistant to enculturation with a degree of detachment and autonomy greater than that found in people who are motivated to simply adjust and go along with their own groups in groups or society. They value system results from their great acceptance of self and others and easily revolve or transcend many dichotomies such as work, pleasure, selfish, unselfish, good and bad, that others view as absolute opposites. Excuse me. Carl Rogers, another influential humanistic psychologist, characterized the fully functioning person in many ways that parallel Maslow's description. Rogers' theory holds that people have an actualizing tendency, which is inherent, striving to actualize, maintain, and enhance the organism. When people function according to valuing processes based within them and are therefore following their actualizing tendency, experiences can be accurately symbolized into awareness and efficiently communicated. Thus, according to Rogers, full humanist involves openness to experiences of all kinds without distorting them. People thus open to experience will show a flexible existential kind of living that allows change, adaptability, and a sense of flow. These people trust their own internal feelings of what is right, and they use that self as their basis and guide to behavior. Excuse me. Rogers, like Maslow, holds that such people do not necessarily adjust or conform to cultural prescriptions, but nevertheless they do live constructively. Rogers, Maslow, and most self-actualization theorists present an optimistic. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Rogers, Maslow, and most self-actualization theorists present an optimistic and favorable view of human nature. Unlike Sigmund Freud and classical psychoanalysts who believe humans to be basically irrational and human impulses to require control through through socialization and other societal constraints, self-actualization theorists regard human nature as constructive, trustworthy, positive, removing rational, and possessing an inherent capacity to realize or actualize itself.
Do we want to do this next section in sets of three or sets of five?
Whatever works for you.
Okay. So now we're going to be talking about Maslow's 15 characteristics of self-actualizers more in depth. This portion will include the characteristics itself, a direct quote from Maslow's work, and interpretations of what each characteristic means for the self-actualizer. The interpretations come from a few different psychological sources, which will all be linked as always. So, number one, they have a more efficient perception of reality and more comfortable relations with it. Self-actualizing people have an unusual ability to detect the spurious, the fake, and the dishonest in personality, and in general to judge people correctly and efficiently. Maslow suggests that this efficiency to detect falsehoods extended to many other areas of life, including art, music, scientific matters, and even politics. Self-actualized people could spot inconsistencies or concealed realities far more easily than the non-self-actualized persons. This trait can easily be mistaken for good taste or good judgment, but throughout the study, it became clear to Maslow that this was in fact something beyond those two assumptions. He concluded that this was based on these people's very consistent perception. They seem to have a permanent view that they seem to have a permanent view of what goes on behind the scenes. The second one is acceptance of self, others, and nature. They can accept their own human nature with all its shortcomings, with all its discrepancies from the ideal image without feeling real concern. Self-actualized people lack overriding guilt, crippling shame, and extreme anxiety. They are more content with life and all of its shortcomings. This is a direct contrast to the person who is constantly crippled by anxiety and worries. The self-actualized person is also able to enjoy their animal nature without feelings of regret, shame, or apology. They seem to have a uniformly good appetite for food. They seem to sleep well. They seem to enjoy their sexual lives without unnecessary inhibition, and so on. This is not to say that they never experience guilt or shame. They just experience it in appropriate amounts that are rarely hindered. They just experience it in appropriate amounts and are rarely hindered by it. The acceptance of one's self has a lot to do with Jung's idea of the shadow, as the shadow carries a lot of the things we struggle with internally and must be confronted. And failing to properly integrate your shadow can lead to all sort of tensions and struggles within yourself, which bleed out into the rest of your life. Cough, cough, spirituality, shadow work, cough, cough. The third one is going to be spontaneity, simplicity, and naturalness. Their behavior is marked by simplicity and naturalness and by lack of artificiality or straining for effect. His unconventionality is not superficial but essential or internal, and his and he is perhaps more human, more revealing of the original nature of the species. The self-actualized person's mind is inherently unconventional, and they may feel out of place in normal social situations, but they tend to play along with them as not to hurt anyone who thinks that they are pleasing him. Though this person will never allow for social convention to get in the way of their doing something important, they can easily drop their facade in order to achieve a goal. The self-actualized person is motivated by developing more fully into their own style, which is in direct contrast to the non-self-actualized person who is primarily motivated by basic needs, gratification, things like food, water, shelter, etc., and maintaining societal personas. Next, we have problem centering. Self-actualizing people are in general strongly focused on problems outside of themselves. They are not generally much concerned about themselves. These individuals customarily have some mission in life, some task to fulfill, some problem outside themselves, which enlist much of their energies. Self-actualized people tend to be focused on what could be called philosophical questions. They tend to live in the wildest possible frame of reference. In other words, they see the big picture and often contemplate the meaning of it. This ability to view the world with such a large frame of reference, a very important social and interpersonal importance. This ability of theirs has an innate way of imparting feelings of serenity and lack of worry that make life less painful for not only themselves, but for all those who are associated with them. Furthermore, self-actualizing people are often drawn towards freedom of in Furthermore, self-actualizing people are more, oh my God. Furthermore, self-actualizing people are often drawn towards freedom of individuation. They often value their own personal sovereignty of sacrificing themselves to something that doesn't bring them joy. So they may show ferocious drive to escape the matrix or find way to access more and more freedom. These types sometimes these types sometimes live in places you wouldn't expect. The quality of detachment and need for privacy is number 5. For all my subjects, it is true that they can be solitary. For all my subjects, it is true that they can be solitary without harm to themselves and without discomfort. It is true for almost all that they can positively like solitude and privacy in a definite greater degree than the average person. Self-actualized people are often undisturbed by that which produces stress in others. This is one of the first things that people notice about self-actualized people. They have an ability to remain calm and serene through personal misfortunes without reacting overly emotionally. This can be due to their ability to stick with their own perception of events rather than relying upon how others view the matter. This idea may be reflected in the archetype of the mystical monk in the mountain. This person is extremely content and makes a practice of accepting and living in solitude. This archetype represents a mystical quality that comes from one's ability to be comfortable alone. This is a sort of peace that can radiate from them.
Next is autonomy. Self-actualized people are not dependent for their main satisfactions on the real world or other people or culture or means to ends or in general intrinsic satisfactions. Rather, they are dependent for their own development and continued growth of their own potentialities. The self-actualized person is not at all dependent on what others think of them. Espe- that, that was so fine until the end. The self-actualized person is not at all dependent on what others think of them. This state of detachment can sometimes be mistaken for rebellion, especially by those who desire to control others. Oftentimes, in the path of individuation, a self-actualizing person will need to break free from systems that were holding them and preventing them from reaching a more aligned state. This might look this might look like a sudden break from a long career path into something seemingly random to others, or a drastic life shift. This is a less of a caring less of people think and more of a radical call into something higher than the perceptions of others, perhaps a hero's journey or a desire to create something ordinary. 7 is continued freshness of appreciation. Self-actualizing people have the wonderful capacity to appreciate again and again, freshly and naively, the basic good of life with awe, pleasure, wonder, and even ecstasy, however stale these experiences may have become to others. For such a person, any sunset may be as beautiful as the first one. This newness is very refreshing for those who associate with self-actualized people. A husband of 60 years may just be as awestruck by his wife's present at 80 as he was when he first married her. This is almost a childlike spirit or playfulness that never seems to dull with age. As Maslow puts it, even the thousandth flower for the self-actualized person is just as beautiful as the first. This may also come from the self-actualizing person's ability to stay present and to not have as many distracting thoughts. Often people with scattered minds or who are always thinking about the past or future struggle to enjoy the present moment. Thus, they miss out on a lot of the beauty that life has to offer. 8. Mystic experiences. Feelings of limitless horizons opening up to the vision, the feeling of being simultaneously more powerful and also more helpless than one was ever before. The great feeling of the feeling of great ecstasy and wonder and awe, the loss of placing in time and space with, finally, the conviction that something extremely important and valuable has happened. These peak experiences were noted by subjects to have occurred during orgasm as well as through intense enjoyment of music or art. These experiences even extended into a broader range of any experience, which included any time there is a loss of self, problem centering, meditation, or even intense concentration. Self actualized people tend to feel to the fullest extent and feel in such a way that is out of reach to the non self actualized person. 9. Community feeling. Self-actualizing people have, for human beings in general, a deep feeling of identification, sympathy, and affection in spite of the occasional anger, impatience, or disgust. Because of this, they have a genuine desire to help the human race as if they were all members of a single family. Maslow goes on to say that self-actualized people often feel distant and alien to the non-self-actualized person. Very few people understand him, thus he is often saddened and even enraged by the self-imposed limitations of the non-self-actualized person. This causes the self-actualized person to take on the role of the older brother/sister. Excuse me. As Alfred Adler put it, it's because they see a truth that is very clear to them which is veiled to the non-self-actualized person. This desire often comes This desire to help often comes from the ability to look deeply into reality and realize the core truths of our existence, such as how fragile life is, the beauty that exists in nature, the sacredness of the human spirit, the magic of life, etc. This sense of awe and wonder is something that they wish everyone else could see. The desires of theirs can often turn into frustration or the ability to become a sage or subtle teacher that helps others see the beauty too. Interpersonal relations. Self actualizing people have deeper and more profound interpersonal relations than any other adults, although not necessarily deeper than those of children. They are capable of more fusion, greater love, more perfect identification, more obliteration of the ego boundaries than other people would consider possible. Self-actualized people tend to have very few close acquaintances due to their extreme selectiveness. Their bonds are often deeper, but compared to the non-self-actualized person, their circle of friends is typically very small, if existent at all. Self-actualized people also have no problem speaking realistically and harshly of those who deserve it, and especially of the hypocritical, the pretentious, the pompous, or the self-inflated. Social ranking is of no importance when the self-actualized person recognizes deception, whether these be of religious or political or work-based nature. This behavior may make it more difficult for them to attach to a group or organization, which may lead them more towards isolation. However, if they find others who are on the same journey or carry characteristics of authenticity, they can form deep bonds and relationships with them. It's not that they struggle to connect, they are just more selective with those they choose to share their time with.
Then we have the democratic character structure. All my subjects may be said to be democratic people in the deepest possible sense. They can be and are friendly with anyone of a suitable character, regardless of class, education, political belief, race, or color. It is as if they are not even aware of these differences. These individuals often select friends of an elite nature, thought not elite in birthright, race, or color, but rather eliteness of character, capacity, and talent. These people easily learn from anybody who has something to teach them, no matter what characteristics they may have. This quality is often viewed as humility in the purest form. The majority of Maslow's subjects exhibited an ability to respect all people just based on the fact that they are a fellow human being. This goes along with their very strong sense of right and wrong, or good and evil. Self-actualized people are more likely rather Self-actualized people are more likely rather than less likely to counterattack against evil men and evil behavior. Self-actualizing people tend to pick their role models carefully and often respect certain traits that the elite might carry. Examples of these traits may be authenticity, wisdom, mastery, morality, enjoyment of life, adventurousness, and simplicity. They are also very aware that the people they spend time with will affect either positively or negatively their own internal mind state and ability to move forward with the life that they are intending on having. 12. Discrimination between good and evil. These individuals are strongly ethical. They have definite moral standards. They do right and do not do wrong. Needless to say, their notions of right and wrong and good and evil are often not the conventional ones. Self-actualized people rarely have to debate within themselves whether or not an action is right or wrong. They seem to have an innate sense of right and wrong, though this sense may differ from that of the religious nature. These people may not even be religious at all. Oftentimes, these individuals will face challenges in life where they are forced to choose between their moral leaning and sacrificing a piece of themselves. This can be cultural or it can be personal. This is a key indicator of what separates the self-actualized from the non-self-actualized. When the pressure is on, who truly knows which way to go? Sometimes following your own inner compass can cause tensions or even get you fired. 13 is philosophical, unhostile sense of humor. Their sense of humor is not the ordinary type. They do not consider funny what the average man considers to be funny. They do not laugh at hostile humor or superiority humor. Character Characteristically, what they consider humor is more closely aligned to philosophy than anything else, more akin to parables or fables. Self-actualized people tend to joke about life as a whole. Abraham Lincoln was a great example of this. He probably never made a joke that hurt anyone. His jokes always had a function beyond just invoking a laugh. His jokes always had a function beyond just invoking a laugh. They often carried with them subtle gems of wisdom. Examples of these jokes could be things that most might not find funny, maybe topics of death, ways to perceive reality, actions of others, and facing the harsh things of reality. Oftentimes their jokes are funny, though as oftentimes their jokes are funny though also carry a sort of wisdom that lingers and could enhance the listener's capacity to understand. 14, creativeness. Each one shows in one way or another a special kind of creativeness or originality or intentiveness that has certain peculiar characteristics, which is akin to the universal creativeness of unspoiled children. Maslow goes on to say that this creativeness is different than that of a musician or an artist. It is more related to the self-actualized person's ability to do anything they are engaged in with a certain style. It is as if they are less inhibited or don't care as much about how other people view them or their actions. Things this brings with their this brings with their actions a certain freedom and beauty. The creativeness also closely akin to spontaneity, which is closely related to some of the behaviors seen in children. They have an almost perfect ability of finding joy in even the most monotonous of tasks. And finally, the transcendence of culture and resistance to enculturation. Self-actualizing people are not well adjusted in the naive sense of approval of the identification with the culture. They get along with the culture, they get along with the culture in various ways, but of all of them, it may be said that in a certain profound and meaningful sense, they resist enculturation and maintain inner detachment from the culture in which they are immersed. Although self-actualized people tend to appear normal on the outside, they're the least bit ordinary. Maslow also noted that the majority of subjects never really identified with an organization or culture. They always seem to set themselves outside of it as if they didn't belong to anything at all. This was this was noticed when he would ask them about American culture versus that of other cultures. They didn't hold American culture with any higher regard than that of other cultures. This was quite odd as the Viet that should be Vietnam War. Okay. This was quite odd as the Vietnam War was occurring during the time of this research was conducted. Self-actualizing people tend to see beyond the matrix and can see constructed reality for what it is. They have a special ability to stay grounded and see things from a very stable point of view. Often they may become a beacon for others to go to when times are challenging and people Often they may become a beacon for others to go to when times are challenging and people from all walks of life. These individuals often see humanity as one being who are more connected and similar than they might realize. This allows them to see beyond the illusion of culture and otherness and often gives them a special grace when dealing with others. So now, how do we apply all of that to spirituality? It's a lot.
I have to pause this because I need you to see how my mother looks right now. Why? Because it's there. You're gonna make me get up right now? Yes. Don't get scared, Elle. It's supposed to be red light therapy.
I've
It's
seen those on
funny. You
TikTok.
gotta do what you have to do. It's there. It is on the top. Check the side, the little side thing. You probably can't see it because of the mask. Anyway, so now let's talk about how this applies in spirituality. Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows words. Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows self-actualization at the top as though it's the final step in developing as a human. However, spiritual teachers argue that self-actualization is the final step before reaching your spiritual awakening and further spiritual enlightenment. Characteristics of Characteristics of a spiritual awakening. 1. A heightened sense of interconnectedness with all things. 2. A deeper understanding of your true self beyond ego. 3. Experiencing and feeling deep, profound, universal love. 4. Meeting your anima if you're male, or meeting your animus if you're female. Increased intuition and sensitivity. A, reva- a re- Why is that so hard to say? A reevaluation of your beliefs, values, and life purpose. Lucid dreams, vivid dreams, visions, precognitive events, a sense of expanded consciousness or awareness, a myriad of un- a myriad of other a myriad of other inexplicable phenomena that defy scientific, rational, or logical explanations. Despite your best efforts to understand these experiences through conventional means, you eventually reach a point where you must surrender your need for concrete explanations and embrace it for what it is, a mystical experience. Feelings at times that you're losing your mind.
So, the spiritual awakening is what a lot of people in the spiritual community call self-transcendence, which is in a revised version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, the original hierarchy starts with physiological needs, which is basically your very basic biological requirements, things like breathing, food, sleep, anything that'll keep you alive. To his safety needs, these are the desire for a predictable and secure life, including protection from danger, financial stability, health stability, things like that. 3 was love and belongingness, the emotional need for connection through friendships, intimacy, and being part of a supportive group. 4 is your esteem needs. This is the pursuit of self-respect and desire for status, recognition, and appreciation from the people around you. And then 5 was self-actualization. This is the personal drive to reach your potential, grow your talents, and find the true fulfillment. Now, the expanded hierarchy starts with your biological needs, safety needs, love and belongingness, and esteem needs. But then 5 is going to be your cognitive needs, which is knowledge of understanding, curiosity, exploration, need for meaning and predictability. Cognitive needs drive our pursuit of knowledge and understanding. For instance, a student's desire to understand complex mathematical theories, a traveler's curiosity about diverse cultures, or an individual's quest for life's deeper meanings all exemplify these needs. Meeting these needs facilitates personal growth, comprehension, and deeper understanding of life and complexities. Then six would be your aesthetic needs, which is appreciation and search for beauty, balance, form, etc. Fulfilling these needs leads to a deeper sense of satisfaction and harmony in life as individuals seek environments and experiences that are pleasing and resonate with their sense of beauty. This involves the appreciation and pursuit of art, music, nature, and other forms of aesthetic expression. Fulfilling these needs isn't just about physical beauty, but also the emotional and psychological satisfaction derived from experiencing order and elegance. Then seven is self-actualization needs, and eight would be transcendence needs. This is a person is motivated. Eight would be transcendence needs, just described as a person is motivated by values that transcend beyond the personal self. Beyond self-actualization, they represent the human desire to connect with a higher reality, purpose, or the universe. This level emphasizes altruism, spiritual connection, and helping others achieve their potential. Individuals seek experiences that move beyond personal concerns, aiming to achieve a deep sense of unity, understanding, and belonging within the vast expanse of existence. Examples of transcendence needs include mystical experiences and certain experiences with nature, aesthetic experiences, sexual experiences, service to others, and pursuit of science, religious faith, and so on. So we have kind of that last tier is where a lot of people who write about spirituality are saying self-transcendence is where we kind of bridge that gap into spiritual awakening.
So now we can talk about self-transition. Now we can talk about self-transcendence and spiritualities. Human beings experience all kinds of altered states of consciousness or peak experiences. But just so you know, not all altered states of consciousness are peak experiences. Being drunk and intoxicated with alcohol might feel good, but it's not a peak state. For that, you'll need a little bit more effort than downing a few shots. Flow state. Ooh, I love this. I love this part already. We can experience peak states by engaging in certain activities. For example, the flow state, a crucial element of positive psychology because of its association with well being, is a type of peak experience frequently seen in athletic activities and musicians. In the flow state, we are so engaged in what we're doing that it's as if the whole world and the self disappear. In the flow state, we are totally focused on what we're doing to the exclusion of all thought or reference to anything else. Mystical experiences. They are a type of altered state or consciousness considered a peak state. Experiences. Why can't I English right now? They are a type of altered state of consciousness that's also considered a peak experience. When people have mystical experiences, they have a sense of their personal identity receding as they reunite with a higher presence, sense of oneness, or something greater than themselves. They may be flooded with feelings of love, joy, and sacredness. Like other peak experiences, time and space become extraneous. What sets a mystical experience apart is its noetic aspect. It's as if the experiencer experiences an ultimate reality more than in everyday life, everyday human consciousness, as if they experience cognition gained through direct knowledge, and sometimes the knowledge is paradoxical. These these experiences are ineffable, which means you can't explain them to someone who hasn't had one. Self-transcendent experiences are very similar to mystical experiences, except they tend to lack the sacred, noetic, and paradoxical elements. The defining feature of a self transcendent experience is the fading of individual boundaries and limitations, emerging into something greater than yourself, oneness, or your surroundings.
So let's just kind of try and go into a little bit of a recap since that was a lot of information. So, self-actualization is going to be driving you to find what you are capable of, what your highest purpose is, and truly what is your top state that you can be as a human life form? Self-actualization is a gateway to spiritual awakening, as is believed by a lot of people who study spirituality. I personally think that that is a very easy thing to like kind of make that connection is that like once you get to like your highest purpose as a human being, of course, then you're going to try and expand your consciousness. The pursuit of self-transcendence and spirituality practice can look like a lot of things, such as meditation, shadow work, spiritual growth, and your connection with your intuition. I also think that there's a certain level of like, if you are a witchy person and you do divination and things of that sort, that can really help you kind of have those more mystical experiences. Everyone talks about whenever you're going through a spiritual awakening and you start to see like shadows out of the corner of your eyes. That's very much so a mystical experience, which I think leads you to that self-transcendence. But if you were to say that to literally anyone else, they would think you're crazy.
I say the 15 parts of self-actualization that we read through were really interesting because they all relate back to previous episodes that we've discussed in one way, shape, or form. And I think that at some point or another, we each had our own self-actualization experience, whether we want to classify it or not. I think that it's pretty much like you summarized here. It is pretty much the path to a spiritual awakening, and I think we don't realize it until we've gone through it because when you're in the process you're kind of just like, well, I really don't know what this is. But then when you come out on the other side of it, that's when you're like, okay, wait, I realize what's happening here now. I'm moving to the next phase of a higher being of sorts. So I definitely think that this was a really interesting podcast episode and was very well put together because I think the background really paved the way to how it connects with the spiritual aspect.
And I feel like it's really interesting because I know like there's that TikTok sound that's like, do I believe in witchcraft? Yes, but do I also believe that witchcraft is just like spicy psychology that hasn't yet been able to be quantified and explained? I don't know what Maslow was doing in the 70s. I'm not a psychologist. That's not my field of study. But personally, I feel like he really was onto something and he had created that like original hierarchy of needs. But then his later work suggested that he wanted to change it to have the self-transformation or, sorry, self-transcendence included in it, but it never ended up getting changed in the like official work. It was just scholars that came after him that found his work that then introduced that portion. And I just think that it's really interesting that we continue to see these connections between like psychological theories and then spiritual concepts because everything in the universe is connected. We just can't explain everything yet, which is I think my favorite part of this episode is like it kind of gives you a little bit more explanation of like a theory that you probably wouldn't have even realized existed unless you were a psychology student.
Yeah. And funny that you mentioned that. Like, eventually, I personally feel that there's going to become a world in which maybe not right now, but in maybe the next 200, 300 years, spirituality is going to be like in a new form. And I think it's going to make a lot of things click for people. And I'm a firm believer that as we, evolve through time. I was like, what's the word I want to use? As we evolve through times, like things are making more and more sense as we understand them. So I definitely think that this is going to be something that's more talked about and more like basically talked about in a way that's not like hush hush.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I honestly really enjoyed researching this episode because there's so much information about it. And like, I wanted to give some of it that's directly from Maslow because who better to quote than the man himself who did the study and wrote the theory? But I also kind of wanted to get some like current psychologists within recent years kind of take on it for the interpretations. So. Yeah, that's my final thoughts. I honestly really liked writing the script for this episode. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was definitely a good one. Anyway, let's get right into tarot time.
All right, let's see. I Spirit really, I don't know what is up with Spirit in the cards recently, but I don't even have to ask.
She
Eager
said,
to
"Here, damn," or he, or they. We don't know.
All right. We have the Knight of Swords. The Knight of Swords is very much so about needing to take action quickly, but very much so calculated action because the sword is double-edged, can very, very easily bite you in the booty if you aren't, watching out for yourself and having your best interest at heart. So, I guess the biggest thing with this is to take action where you feel necessary, but make sure that you evaluate the potential repercussions of said action, which I mean, we should be doing anyways, but that's always a good reminder to have.
That's T. I'm sure that Astrology Almanac will just talk way more about what this all means for you.
Today, Neptune and Aries will sextile Pluto and Aquarius. Today's energy is all about getting rid of the old so you can bring in a fresh start. It's time to embrace innovation so you can grow and change in the ways that best serve your current purpose. Then on the 26th, Saturn goes retrograde in Aries. Saturn is all about pushing the boundaries, and when it retrogrades in Aries, it's time to break some rules that are nonsensical. Just be careful not to go overboard during this phase of rebellion. Also, on the 26th, the Sun in Leo opposes Pluto in Aquarius. This is a challenging aspect. Try to stay close to home as a lot of things can go wrong if you are out and about. If things go awry, try to stay optimistic and don't take anything too personally. On the 29th, we have an action-packed day in astrology. First off, Venus in Virgo will square with Mars in Gemini, which can lead to relationship drama, charged emotions, okay, which can lead to relationship drama and charged emotions. Try to communicate using a clear head and don't assume the worst from a comment that may have been taken out of context. On this day, we also have the Sun in Leo conjuncting Jupiter in Leo. This aspect is quite the opposite of the previous one, as it can ignite passion and romance. This may be the balance you need to enjoy the day despite the square occurring with Venus and Mars. Finally, to round out the astrologically charged day, we have a full moon in Aquarius. This full moon will help you to connect with friends, new and old, and you may even want to host a community event that is a little more unconventional, but will bring a lot of people from all walks of life together. Release expectations of sticking to the status quo during this full moon, and everything will move forward in ways you least expected.
I was just gonna say it's connected every single time. Every single time, like without fail. That's crazy. But thank you guys for tuning in and sticking around for this episode. It was a bit of a doozy, but definitely learned a lot here. So I hope you did too. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and follow us on socials. And if you want to learn more about self actualization or Maslow's theory, you can click the links in the description box. Really interesting. Definitely should check it out. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.